through the dense forests, behind the tall mountains, under the deep seas. Within our world lies vast wonders and untold treasures, chambers of gold, cities of emerald, riches hidden away by the authorities of powerful and mysterious forces. It is often dreamt of to uncover these ancients and claim whatever prize you can imagine. However, the myths surrounding these encounters are often steeped with the blood of the foolish. Good evening, travelers. My name is Anunnaki, and in tonight's episode of Crypto Crossing, we're taking a look at the Arabian Djinn and the Celtic Leprechaun to see who's the more dangerous wish-granting trickster. For the uninitiated, Crypto Crossing is the show where we look at who these monsters are, what they can do, and finally discuss why one of them would beat the other. Who are the Leprechauns? Leprechauns are a kind of mythical being found in Irish folklore. The name leprechaun has a few debated origins, but is generally said to come from the Irish word leprechaun, meaning fairy or sprite, which in turn comes from the older lucropaun and lucorpaun, meaning small body. Alternatively, the name is said to come from Leith Brogan, meaning single shoe or half shoe. Why a name like that, you might ask? This is due to the fact that leprechauns are believed to be shoemakers by trade. In addition to this, they also serve as mystical bankers, so to speak, collecting and storing treasure in large pots which they stash away underground. When they aren't cobbling away at shoes or counting up their gold, leprechauns are said to engage in festive activities such as drinking, dancing, and playing musical instruments. In fact, they are said to dance for so long that their shoes wear down to nothing, forcing them to build themselves new shoes as replacements. For as prominent as leprechauns are depicted in media nowadays, from serial to horror films, they were actually pretty uncommon in folklore. It's believed that stories of leprechauns didn't become popular until Irish immigrants brought them to America in the late 1800s. There are a few similar beings in Celtic folklore that the modern leprechaun borrows traits from. For example, the Leprechaun is said to be a close relative. These are small household fairies who are said to haunt wine cellars, where they steal drinks from the owner's supply of booze. Another less friendly variant is the Far de Rig, a mischievous fairy known for kidnapping people and playing cruel jokes, usually resulting in harm to everyone involved. To see how leprechauns originated, we'll have to go way back to the beginnings of Celtic mythology and look at a powerful group called the Tuatha Dé Danann. Meaning the folks of the goddess Danu, the Tuatha Dé Danann were a magical race of godlike warriors who were said to be one of the first inhabitants of ancient Ireland. Alongside them was another group, the Fomorians, a race of monstrous beings who usually opposed them. The full history of the Tuatha Dé Danann, the Fomorians, and their battles with each other and local humans is too lengthy to cover all of here, but the basic idea is that the three groups had many battles to ultimately determine the ownership of the Emerald Isles. The Fomorians were defeated and driven out to sea, while the Tuatha Dé Danann and humans made a deal to each take half of the land. However, the humans didn't exactly make a fair trade. The half the humans claimed was the top half, forcing the Tuatha Dé Danann to live underground in the bottom half. Because of this, the conditions of the earth were said to have made them smaller and uglier over the centuries. Their Fey descendants haven't forgotten about this deal. In fact, it's what drives them to be as clever and crafty as possible, to ensure that they never end up on the raw end of any deal ever again. However, the full lineage of the modern leprechaun is a little murky. See, it's believed that leprechauns are an entirely male race with no females, and they do not naturally reproduce. Instead, they are said to be the offspring of fairies and evil spirits. I find this classification interesting as the terms fairies and spirits were often used interchangeably for describing similar supernatural beings in this context. Given the lore described earlier, it might make sense to say fairies refers to descendants of the Tuatha De Danann, while evil spirits are the descendants of Fomorians, making the modern leprechauns a sort of bastardized hybrid between the two groups. This is backed up by how leprechauns are said to live underground, as the Tuatha De Danann had. Meanwhile, Fomorian ancestry is suggested by how they were originally presented as ocean spirits in their earliest story. The story describes how the king of Ulster fell asleep on a beach and awoke to find 3 little men dragging him into the sea. The king apprehended these men, and in return for their release, they promised him 3 wishes. Who are the Djinn? Jinn are a mystical race found in Islamic mythology and Arabian folklore. The name comes from the Arabic word jan, meaning to hide or conceal, literally making them beings hidden from our senses. Jinn is the collective name for many of these beings, while a singular entity is called a genie. This is where the English word genie comes from. But the Jinn of folklore are very different than the genies of modern media, so let's start with where they came from. Centuries before God created man out of earth, the Jinn were created out of fire and given a free will, differentiating them from the angels and giving them reign over the then young world. They formed their own cities, their own kingdoms, made their own laws and governed themselves. With free will comes the choice between right and wrong, and with that choice comes the ability to sin. Eventually their wickedness grew so much that divine intervention was required, and war broke out between the Jinn and the angels. Ultimately, after ruling the earth for 1,000 years, the Jinn were defeated and exiled to the mountains of Kaf, a great mountain range made of solid emeralds said to encircle the furthest corners of the world. Now, unlike humans and angels, there are actually many different kinds of Jinn. In a previous episode I've talked about ghouls, a monstrous variant who feeds upon the dead. There are also Jan, which take the form of sandstorms, Ifrits, which serve as demons in the underworld, and Hin, which are basically the genie equivalent of animals. But aside from all these are the Marid, which I will primarily be examining in this episode. Arabic for giant because of their large size, the Marid are said to be the most powerful kind of genie, and the kind most commonly depicted. They come in a range of colors based on their rank and power, starting at green when they are young and turning blue as they get older. Colors like purple, gold, and even black are also possible, but are restricted to only the most powerful or royal of the Jinn. While the majority of the surviving Jinn now reside in Kaf, there were many who chose to remain hidden throughout the world. Likewise, some criminal Jinn are said to flee Kaf to avoid punishment for their crimes. It is said that Jinn can be found in many desolate areas or abandoned places around the world, usually deserts, cemeteries, and the ruins of ancient cities. It is commonly believed that the modern Jinn may inhabit various inanimate objects such as coins, precious stones, and of course, magic lamps, either because they have chosen these objects as hiding places, or because they have been trapped in them against their will by some sort of priest or magician. Releasing Jinn from these objects can be good or bad depending on the nature of the genie itself, as their free will makes them capable of both good and evil. A genie that is thankful may offer magical wishes in return for its freedom, while other more malevolent Jinn may use this opportunity to bring misfortune by granting said wishes in twisted and horrible ways. Now that we've gotten to know who tonight's combatants are, let's take a look at exactly what they are and what they can do. Leprechauns are classified as a kind of fairy. They're usually depicted as 1 to 2 feet in height, although some are said to be much smaller. As the offspring of fae and spirits, they are analogous to other infertile hybrids in nature, such as when horses and donkeys are bred together to create mules. However, their population tends to stay at a fixed number, as they are said to be immortal and killing one is actually almost unheard of. Despite having a physical body, they are not required to eat, drink, or sleep, though most choose to perform these activities anyway for their own enjoyment. The Jinn are a class of shape-shifting beings who by default cannot be detected by our senses, though they often reveal themselves when provoked. While they may come in many different varieties, the Marid are said to be enormous in size and typically blue in color when they reach full maturity. While this fluid form gives them a very long lifespan, generally 10 or more times than normal humans. Djinn are ultimately still mortal and require food and rest the same way any other living thing would. Given their small size, it should come as no surprise to see ordinary humans apprehend and restrain leprechauns with ease, indicating they're very weak. However, this is somewhat contradicted by the leprechaun's relative, the Far-Derig, who demonstrate a level of strength far greater than a human's, which enables them to even kidnap able-bodied adults using large sacks and carry them away. Another notable feat comes from their Tuatha-De Danann ancestor, Lu, who is sometimes said to be the first leprechaun. One of Lu's famous battles was against another god named Balor, a giant with a large singular eye. Lu used a simple sling to hurl a rock into Balor's eye with such force that it knocked the eye out the back of Balor's head. Considering the godlike nature of Balor and his indeterminate size, it's impossible to say how strong this makes Lu, and even more ambiguous on what it means for leprechauns in general. However, this feat, coupled with the Far-Derigs, indicates that leprechauns should at least be as strong as the average man, if not stronger. Now with the Djinn, their strength is a bit more obvious. For starters, it's said that the Djinn have an enhanced strength that makes them nigh unbeatable in tests of combat or raw strength. It's also said that Solomon, the ancient king of Israel, had a magic ring that gave him authority over Djinn, and with it he commanded them to construct the first temple of Jerusalem. It isn't difficult to imagine the Djinn using their incredible strength to move the large stonework into place. However, this is a little dubious for a number of reasons. First being that other large monuments, such as the Great Pyramids, were built by ordinary humans, meaning superhuman strength wasn't needed for the temple's construction. The second reason is that the temple in question is no longer standing, so it's very difficult to tell exactly how large or impressive its stonework even was. Much better feat comes from the city of Bala, where it is said that Djinn were used for transporting an entire mosque from Rustak, nearly 375 miles away, by carrying it through the air overnight. Now this mosque, or at least what's left of it, doesn't appear to be very large, and we also don't know how many Djinn it took to move it, so again it's very difficult to give an accurate estimate for how strong this makes them, but it's fair to say that the Djinn's strength is obviously well beyond superhuman. The exact speed of a leprechaun and how they even get around is a little unclear. It's famously said that the moment you take your eye off a leprechaun, they vanish without a trace. This could mean a number of things: the ability to teleport when unobserved, a great speed that is faster than the human eye can track, or possibly just a very adept skill at staying out of sight or quickly finding places to hide. At any rate, the effect should still be the same. The leprechaun would have a strong ability to maneuver around the battlefield. Being composed of smokeless fire, the Djinn are not restricted to the ground and instead fly through the air, and at incredible speeds. In one story they are noted as flying from Baghdad to Cairo, a distance of roughly 800 miles, in only a couple hours. While we don't know the exact time frame, a minimum of 2 hours puts their travel speed at 400 miles per hour, while a less generous assumption of 4 hours puts them closer to 200 miles per hour. It is sometimes even said that Djinn may teleport to any location instantaneously. Instances of this happening appear to be the result of magic, which actually seems that not all are capable of, as this creates a few contradictions with their weaknesses. At any rate, moving between locations with the aforementioned speeds would appear like teleportation anyway due to being much faster than the eye can track. Now, I know how it may sound to have both the leprechauns and Djinn's physical stats left so ambiguous, but as we'll come to see, physical stats are hardly the strong suit of either of these magical tricksters, so without further ado, let's address the elephant in the room. Considering their mystical heritage and advanced age, the leprechauns are said to possess a wide variety of magical spells and abilities. In particular, their magic stems from Celtic Wicca, which is heavily based around using spells and magic words. A prominent ability of the leprechauns is transmutation, allowing them to change just about anything into anything else. In one example, a leprechaun would take a simple twig and transform it into a live horse to ride upon, showing that this even applies to living things. Beyond this is the ability to create illusions, as well as a host of many other miscellaneous spells for just about any occasion. In contrast, the magic of the Djinn actually seems to work a little differently. While many ancient and powerful Djinn demonstrate arcane knowledge that allows them to perform traditional magic, much of their abilities instead stem from their unique physiology. As the Djinn can naturally shapeshift into virtually anything as well as grow or shrink in size, this allows them to effectively create anything out of thin air by simply transforming part of themselves into the desired product. This is most useful when granting wishes, as it allows them to create virtually anything the wisher has in mind. In some stories, the magic of the Djinn is said to completely alter reality itself. However, the level of power and wisdom needed for this kind of magic is usually restricted to the more powerful ranks of Djinn, such as the purple, golden, and black varieties. This should go without saying, but leprechauns are noted as being incredibly intelligent. While this is in part due to their age that makes them incredibly wise, it's also mainly out of necessity to ensure that they are never made a fool of due to how the Tuatha Danann were tricked out of their land. The gift of gab is perhaps the leprechaun's greatest weapon, allowing them to swindle their aggressors and create more favorable situations for themselves. By comparison, the Djinn are also noted as being rather intelligent for similar reasons: their incredible longevity and in some cases the need for self-preservation, such as to remain hidden to evade both the wrath of God and anyone else who may intend to punish them for their crimes. In particular, the Djinn enjoy twisting the words of others in order to make their wishes backfire on them. Besides the basic clothes on their backs, leprechauns are known to carry with them a trove of different worldly possessions. Besides large sums of gold they have stored away and the tools for cobbling shoes, leprechauns are generally depicted as carrying shillelaghs, a kind of traditional walking stick. Leprechauns are also said to own other unique trinkets, generally magical items used for trickery. In particular is a golden coin that, once spent, will always return to their pocket, and a silver coin that later changes itself into a dead leaf. The concept of material goods isn't lost on the Djinn either, as those living in their hidden kingdoms are said to buy and sell property. Djinn found in the wild, however, seem to live a more vagabond lifestyle, caring more about the object that they reside in. As mentioned before, this is usually a precious item like a jewel or a coin, or some sort of vessel like a bottle or a lamp. Alright, now to cover their respective shortcomings. As mentioned before, the small size of leprechauns makes them vulnerable to capture, sometimes due to their own physical limitations. Often the ideal way to restrain a leprechaun is to grab hold of them by the beard or collar of their shirt. This is potentially due to the reliance of needing to speak their spells out loud to use their magic, so restricting the ability to speak may prevent them from escaping. As with all fairies, they are said to be particularly weak against iron. Likewise, the wrath of God is said to weaken them, and therefore evoking the Lord's name is said to stun or even harm them. For as big and mighty as they are, the Djinn come with a laundry list of things they specifically can't do. The Djinn cannot untie a knot, they cannot unlock a lock, they cannot open something that is closed, they cannot reveal something that is hidden, etc., etc. This is largely why, when you catch a Djinn inside a bottle and put a lid on them, they can't get out. This also further indicates that the Djinn lack true teleportation, as otherwise a puny bottle would never serve as a prison. However, this weakness of theirs is not universally accepted. Instead, there are many who believe the only thing keeping Djinn trapped inside their containers is the Seal of Solomon, the symbol originally used by King Solomon to gain control over them. As such, only containers or objects marked with this may trap them. Bottles aside, there are also some more conventional weaknesses. For starters, iron. Second, learning a Djinn's name grants the learner the power to either enslave them or even kill them. Many battles against the Djinn are therefore fought using wits to trick them, often by taking advantage of the genie's own arrogance. Lastly, there's some famous rules surrounding the wishes granted by modern genies, so I'll address those too. They cannot kill, although this is unclear if this is a physical limitation or a moral one. They also cannot make people fall in love, as they cannot affect a person's will, meaning no mind control abilities. And finally, they cannot bring people back from the dead, as they have no control over a human's departed soul. Okay, I think that's everything. So this match is a little tricky because this is hardly a test of stats like strength and durability. For all intents and purposes, these two beings shouldn't be able to actually kill one another. As stated in previous episodes, death isn't the requirement for defeating the enemy, so we can still take a look at who better takes advantage of the other. Factoring in everything, I believe the winner of this match would be the Leprechaun. Here's why. First, addressing physicality, it might seem obvious that the Djinn have more than enough strength to apprehend and easily defeat the little green men in physical combat. However, factoring in the strength of the Tuatha Danann like Lu as well as the Fardarig, the gap in strength becomes much more narrow, to the point where other factors take greater precedence. Although if I were to look at this as a direct battle, then it's worth bringing up how the original Djinn were nearly eradicated by the angels, indicating that they can in fact be defeated in combat. While these angels were carrying out the will of God, a specific weakness of theirs, leprechauns are direct descendants from gods, who similarly drove the Fomorians out of their homeland, so there's an argument to be made that the same could happen again. However, I believe this match is instead determined by their respective powers as well as intellect. The genie may have the ability to create anything, but the leprechaun can in turn change or transform those creations into anything else. Moreover, the leprechaun would even be able to change or create living things, something the genie is entirely incapable of. Now, both have a shared weakness towards iron, so we could rule that one out. However, the Djinn has one other great weakness: arrogance. One of the more common ways of defeating the Djinn is to outsmart or trick them, something leprechauns are specially known to do. This does start to delve into the territory of what I like to call esoteric weaknesses, which are weaknesses that shouldn't be exploited because they basically require the enemy to know about them ahead of time. With that in mind, there are still many ways the leprechaun may attempt to trick or outsmart the genie without directly exploiting these weaknesses. If any wagers or bets are made, then the leprechaun has this in the bag, as their skills in dancing and playing instruments are unrivaled. Not to mention, leprechauns sometimes employ magical items to basically cheat or tip the odds in their favor. Speaking of bags, the Fardarig are famous for kidnapping people by trapping them in large sacks, meaning it's entirely possible for the leprechaun to end up trapping and defeating the Djinn for little reason more than a simple prank. And this is omitting what is possibly the most iconic trait associated with leprechauns: luck. Even if this match was completely even, the leprechaun would still claim the victory simply by being more lucky. Overall, I feel the leprechaun has more control over the situation and more chances to outsmart his opponent. This is why I believe the winner of this match would be the leprechaun. I hope you all enjoyed the video as much as I did making it. You can show your support by giving the video a like or sharing it with a friend. If you really want to help out, you can become one of my supporters on Patreon and gain access to a few fun perks. Anything you could do would greatly help out and make it easier for me to make more of these in the future. Until next time, this has been Zenonaki, signing off.